Joining us now is the beat writer for the Detroit Red Wings with MLive Media Group. It's Ansar Khan back with us again on the MegaCast. Ansar, thank you for being with us.
Glad to be with you.
Appreciate having you on. So in terms of the Red Wings, still very much in the thick of the rebuild, but a lot more promising of a result this season than we've seen in the past. The young guys on the team producing on a higher level. Certainly the rookies in Seider and Lucas Raymond were excellent this season. Dylan Larkin had a nice comeback season. All in all, ended the season at 32-24. So 32-24-10 to finish with 74 points for 12th place in the Eastern Conference. For much of the season, for a large part of the earlier portion of the season, they were right on the cusp of a playoff spot. And so as we continue through this rebuild, in your forecast and in the front office's forecast too, as they're analyzing where to take this rebuild, how far away do they really think they are from contending for a playoff spot and being at that point where this team is ready to do some damage in the Eastern Conference?
I would say as far as contending for a playoff spot, maybe 2 years. I think it's unrealistic to think they finished, I believe, 26 points out of the last playoff spot this year in a very tough Eastern Conference. To think that they can make up that much ground in just 1 year and reach the playoffs next year is just not realistic, regardless of what happens in the offseason. So I think they're looking at, I think ideally they would like to obviously take a step next year and finish right around 500. I think that would be it would show progress. But as far as really competing for a playoff spot, I think you're looking at 2 years down the road.
Yeah, and they're really, as you said, they are really looking to take that next step in this rebuild and really surge forward with the talent that they have now, which is a very young team, with the leadership in Dylan Larkin, their captain, with these younger guys like Bertuzzi, who's a veteran but still on the younger side, and certainly rookies like Mart Seider and Lucas Raymond, who had very productive seasons, and Nedeljkovic also a productive season as a goaltender for the Red Wings too. And so with that being the case, and them really wanting to surge forward and continue on, make that next step, that brings us to the decision recently for the Red Wings to relieve Jeff Blaschel of his duties as head coach. They're not going to retain his contract any further and offer him a new contract. They want to move on, bring in some new leadership. And this has been something that's been of question of the Red Wings for years, whether or not they should be continuing on with Jeff Blaschel. Many in the fan community and in the analyst community over the past several years have year after year been talking about it's time to get rid of Jeff Blaschel. Maybe it's time to move on to somebody else. Now the Red Wings are making that decision. From the front office's standpoint, from your conversations with those decision makers leading the Detroit Red Wings organization, what ultimately was that final decision maker for them, or that final factor that went into saying Jeff Blashel's not quite the guy to bring this team where it needs to go in this rebuild any further?
It was how the things unfolded over the final 2 months of the season. They were going along, pretty nicely for considering what they were, right around 500. I think right mid-February, even into late February, they were at 500. At one point, they were like 5 or 6 points out of the last playoff spot. That was a little bit deceiving because the team that they were chasing, Boston, had 5 games in hand. So I don't think they were ever seriously contending for a playoff spot. But just to be in that conversation was a step up and was showing progress. And they knew that it was going to be tough the final 2 months of the season because the schedule was much tougher. They played a lot of strong teams, especially a lot of strong Eastern teams. So they knew it was going to be difficult to maintain that 500 pace. But the problem was in the way that they lost some of those games. They were getting blown out in quite a few games. They just had a look of just like they didn't know what hit them some nights, and it looked like they stopped trying. The compete level just wasn't the same. That ultimately was the biggest thing in leading to the decision to fire Blaschel. Was the team just was not competing hard enough on a regular basis over those final 2 months. And as a result, the goals against just ballooned. And that was just unacceptable to have them finish second from last in the league in goals against.
We're joined by Ansar Khan, Red Wings beat writer for MLive Media Group. You can read his articles on their website, mlive.com/Red Wings. That's mlive.com to read all of Ansar's articles as the Red Wings go through their offseason and into a very important search for their next head coach after deciding not to retain the services of now former head coach Jeff Blaschel as the head coach of the Red Wings. And so now here comes a big question for the front office as they are approaching the coaching search, as they're approaching the continuation of this rebuild, thinking, as you said, maybe 2 years away from playoff contention and a few more years after that away from strong contention of the entire conference, possibly for a championship overall in the Stanley Cup finals and so on and so forth. So there's that question. Are you taking that next stepping stone with your head coaching position, or are you going for that guy that's going to be with you for a sustained period of time and eventually, you would presume, be your championship winning coach? What are the Red Wings looking for as they look to replace Jeff Blaschel, avoid some of the similar pitfalls of having a younger coach that's used to developing players and bring in that guy that can take this young talent to its next level, but also lead a team that sooner or later will be competing?
Yeah, as Steve Yzerman addressed it yesterday, he said he's very open-minded as far as the qualities he's looking for in a coach. He's not going to narrow himself down into whether it has to be a coach with NHL experience, with head coaching experience from the NHL, an NHL assistant. It could be an NHL assistant. It could be an AHL coach. It could be a guy from Europe. He certainly didn't rule that out. Whatever he does, my feeling is that the next coach is going to be somebody that's more demanding, more hard driving. And that's not to say that Jeff Blaschel wasn't, but Jeff Blaschel was very popular, a very well-liked person, very well-liked throughout the organization. A good person, and that's not to say that the next guy has to be a bad person by any stretch, but I think they're looking for a more abrasiveness, a taskmaster type. When you look at the history, and then this is kind of how it goes with coaching changes. When a team replaces a coach, they don't want to bring in a similar type of personality, a similar type of coach. They almost kind of want to bring in like the opposite type of coach. And that's what this team has done over the years. When you look, they went from a sort of a nice guy in Brian Murray to an absolutely tyrannical Scotty Bowman. And then when he retired, brought in a nice type guy, a player's coach, and Dave Lewis. That didn't work. They replaced him after 2 seasons with Mike Babcock, a very hard driving, demanding coach. And then back to Jeff Blaschel, more on the nicer kind of side, players type coach. So they've kind of alternated, and I think it's time, and I think the organization feels it's time to get somebody who's really going to push these players and going to be more demanding of them.
And do you think that kind of coaching works in today's NHL, especially with the younger guys? We've seen in other sports too that those older school philosophies, you think of some of those harder-nosed coaches in the hockey side, it's guys like Scotty Bowman, guys like Mike Babcock. Does that still work in today's NHL with the youth in this league that's going to be the bulk of this Red Wings team, or could that be something that could potentially be a poison for this organization in its current stage in the rebuild?
Well, it definitely could be dangerous, could be a poison. It could set them back, and that's something that Yzerman certainly has to weigh. You can't get somebody who's just going to be way over the top, like pretty much like Babcock was toward the end there in his treatment of some players like Johan Franzen. And then when he went to Toronto, it was just an absolute mess, the way he handled Mitch Marner. Certainly they don't want that to blow up. They don't want somebody quite like that. But they do, I think, want somebody who's just, I would say, a step or two up in that regard from Blaschel. But yeah, it's certainly, like you said, somebody who's just over the top in today's NHL. I don't think that would fly.
We're joined by Ansar Khan. He's the Red Wings beat writer at mlive.com. More information, of course, on mlive.com. You can read his articles by clicking through their sports section and selecting Red Wings as they go through their coaching search, go through another offseason in this rebuild, and approach next season hoping to continue to move forward with the progress they made in this season. 32-24-10, their final record, 74 points, and 12th place in the Eastern Conference, but great production from their young guys. And so as we continue to talk about the importance of this coaching search, Ansar, it's only been a couple of days since they announced the relieving of Jeff Blaschel after 7 seasons at the helm. But are there any guys out there now that either you know of are on a short list or you think will be on a short list or could be on a short list for this Red Wings coaching search going forward?
I think it's wide open. I think there's quite a few names out there. Certainly, when you think of the rising assistant coaches, one of Yzerman's teammates, Lane Lambert, who's been a longtime assistant under Barry Trotz for 3 different teams, he'll certainly be a candidate. I believe he's in his late 50s. Hasn't gotten an NHL head coaching job yet, but he's certainly due, and really the time's kind of running out at that age. There's a guy, the wild card in it is former Swedish national coach, Ricard Gronborg. Obviously with the Red Wings and their ties to Sweden, the number of players that they've had and that they currently have in their system from Sweden. Plus he's pretty much coached almost every prominent Swedish player through the years, including Nicklas Lidstrom, who's a big supporter of his. He'll certainly be considered, but then you also have to consider that might be a bit, does Yzerman want to take that kind of a risk at this stage? Because there's only been 2 European-born coaches in the NHL. Both were more than 20 years ago, and neither had any much success. They didn't last long. So there is certainly a more of a risk there. And then there's a whole bunch of coaches, a lot of experienced coaches looking for work that have good NHL resumes, like Paul Maurice, John Tortorella, the guy who was fired, Dave Tippett, Alain Vignon, who was fired in Philadelphia. Even Joel Quenneville, who resigned in Florida due to the scandal in Chicago. It's a lot of experienced NHL coaches there too. The thing is with them, it's like, do you want to hire a retread? Especially, some of those guys are getting up there in age too, or does Yzerman want to go with a younger guy? Now, if you base it on his history with Tampa Bay, he hired 2 coaches, Guy Boucher and John Cooper. Neither had any NHL experience. Both were young, and he hired them with the intent that they would be there for the long term. Boucher only lasted, I think, three years. And then, of course, he hired Cooper. He's had much success there for the long term, winning 2 cups there. My guess is he will go the route of a younger guy, somebody that he envisions can continue this rebuild, have, probably, I'm sure, a couple more lean seasons before really kind of taking it to the next level. That would be my guess. I think he would prefer a younger guy.
You can read all of Ansar's articles keeping up with the Red Wings coaching search and the Red Wings offseason coming up by visiting MLive's website at mlive.com/Red Wings. We're joined by Ansar Khan, Red Wings beat writer with MLive Media Group, on the MegaCast. On the personnel side, there's a lot of young players on this team. We've mentioned the youth of this team being key to this rebuild. Very impressive players, but also some players that had a lot of promise but haven't quite lived up to that promise just yet. Guys like Phil Zadina and guys like Michael Rasmussen are a couple that come to mind when you think about these kinds of players and the progress we would have expected from them based on when they were drafted, based on their evaluations as prospects before they made it onto the Red Wings team proper. Where do the Red Wings see them in this rebuild? Is there a chance that these guys could be potentially moved for more prospects or more picks to really bolster this rebuild? Or do the Red Wings believe that guys like Zadina and Rasmussen are still very important parts of this rebuild?
Well, no, Rasmussen, they're very happy with him, actually. He finished the season strong, and he really took a significant step this year. He's definitely not going anywhere. He's a guy that they see as part of the future here. Big guy, versatile, can play center, wing, move up and down the lineup, play the net front role on the power play, even kill penalties. And they like the progress that he's shown. Not the same for Zadina. He was drafted 6th overall for a reason, is because they expected to score goals. He's got a terrific shot, and that's his forte. And but it just hasn't worked. He's shown some flashes here and there, has not shown consistency. Now he's still young. I think he's 22, maybe 23, but he's still young, and so there's always the danger of giving up on a guy too soon and then having him develop in another organization. I question how much more patience they'll have with him, but also the problem there is that, given how he's played, his lack of production, there's just very little trade value there. You're not going to get much for him. If they were to trade him in the off season or in sometime into next season, chances are it would probably be a package deal involving other players. Straight up, I just don't think you're going to get good value for him. You might as well just keep him for a little longer and hope that he does take time and just need more time to develop. But yeah, definitely Rasmussen trending up, Zadina on the hot seat.
And then so there's also a number of prospects who might be making it onto the big club next season that we could be seeing that could also be kind of those guys that come up and make an immediate impact on the team or have an impressive season on the team. They're talented individuals that have youth, but they also have a lot of experience in other professional leagues as well. What are some of the names that you're expecting to see on the Red Wings club next year that could be making an immediate impact as they try to really hit the gas on this rebuild?
Well, the two guys that come to mind first are Jonathan Berggren, very skilled winger who had a terrific first season in Grand Rapids this year, set the rookie scoring record for the Griffins. There was some thought that the Red Wings might want to bring him up late in the season to get a look at him. They kept him down with the Griffins because they were in the playoff chase. And plus just the way things were going in Detroit, the way the team was playing, I don't think they really wanted to bring him up and have him not do well and maybe lose a little bit of confidence there. So he definitely will compete for a job in training camp. They're not going to just hand him a roster spot. They're going to make him work for it, but I think that he will earn a roster spot in training camp next year. The other guy is their big defenseman, Simon Edmondson, their top pick last year, 6th overall. He's had a terrific season in Sweden, and they're very excited. The front office is very excited and optimistic about him. Kind of in the mold of Moritz Seider as far as size and abilities. Although he said, we talked about him yesterday, he says he's a different type of player than Seider. And certainly you wouldn't want to put that kind of expectation on him, as Seider's probably going to win the Calder Trophy as a top rookie. You wouldn't want to put that kind of expectation on Edmondson. And also, but I think he will compete for a job, but it's not a given that he's going to make the team. It's still very difficult for a young defenseman, I believe he's 19, to step into the NHL. Seider, you remember after he was drafted, he still needed a year, although he was probably ready, but they felt it was best for his development to play a year in Grand Rapids, and then COVID happened, and he ended up, he would have, if not for COVID, I think he would have made the Red Wings certainly that second year, but because of all the things happening around COVID, they ended up sending him to Sweden, where he excelled in that league. And then he was absolutely ready. Those 2 years just made him even more polished to come and step right into the NHL. So we'll see with Edmondson. Whether his play certainly will dictate whether he makes the Red Wings roster, or could very well need some time in Grand Rapids.
Ansar, before we let you go, the Stanley Cup playoffs are underway. Who are your favorites in this year's playoff to potentially take the Stanley Cup this year?
That's a good question. This year, I really don't know. It's really wide open. I mean, you can make a case for as many as 10 teams. That's always tempting to say Tampa Bay because they won it the last 2 years, but it's hard to win 3 years in a row. I think the best team I've seen all year was Florida. I think they're just really stacked, explosive team. I would say Florida in the East would be my pick. In the West, I think Calgary is a team that I would watch out for. My prediction would be, and I would predict Florida to win it all over Calgary.
Ansar, thank you very much for joining us.
Glad to be with you.